Hello, and welcome to the Fighting Moose podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Jason Hendrickson. This is a podcast where I retell stories, some fictional and some historical, that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. Today, let's get back into the next 5 chapters of Bowser the Hound, written by Thornton W. Burgess. We are now over the halfway point of January, and I hope that your new year is going well, especially in regards to your reading. I think, starting off this year, I've probably already read about 3 or 4 books in regards to making maple syrup. I think I have mentioned in the past that we are going to try our hand at making some maple syrup this spring, and it's amazing to find the number of people that make this as well. The other day, we were at a hockey game, and I was talking with a couple that I know. A few months back, I saw that the wife of the couple was reading a book about bees. I started a conversation about bees, and have talked about them with her here and there. Then the other day, when I saw them, we started talking about bees, and then we talked about maple syrup, and they said they make maple syrup too. It's crazy what you find out about others just by talking to them. So I guess what I'm trying to say with this whole thing is, try and take some time out of your busy schedule and get to talking with some people and get to know their hobbies and interests. Who knows, you might find out that you have the same likes and dislikes and kindle the start of a new friendship. Now, let's turn to today's story. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin.
Go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Chapter 6. The Surprise of Blacky the Crow. The harder it is to follow a trail, the greater the reason you should not fail. Bowser the Hound. At all seasons of the year, Blacky the Crow is something of a traveler. But in winter, he is much more of a traveler than in summer. You see, in winter, it is not nearly so easy to pick up a living. Food is quite as scarce for Blacky the Crow in winter as for any of the other little people who neither sleep the winter away nor go south. All of the feathered folks have to work and work hard to find food enough to keep them warm. You know, it is food that makes heat in the body. So in the winter, Blacky is in the habit of flying long distances in search of food. He often goes some miles from the thick hemlock tree in the green forest where he spends his nights. You may see him starting out early in the morning and returning late in the afternoon. Now Blacky knew all about that river into which Bowser the Hound had fallen. There was a certain place on that river where Jack Frost never did succeed in making ice. Sometimes things good to eat would be washed up along the edge of this open place. Blacky visited it regularly. He was on the way down there now, flying low over the treetops. Presently, he came to a little opening among the trees. In the middle of it was a little house, a rough little house. Blacky knew all about it. It was a sugar camp. He knew that only in the spring of the year was he likely to find anybody about there. All the rest of the year it was shut up. Every time he passed that way, Blacky flew over it. Blacky's eyes are very sharp indeed, as everybody knows. Now, as he drew near, he noticed right away that the door was partly open. It hadn't been that way the last time he passed. "Huh!" exclaimed Blacky. "I wonder if the wind blew that open, or if there is someone inside. I think I'll watch a while." So Blacky flew to the top of a tall tree from which he could look all over the little clearing and could watch the door of the little house. For a long time he sat there as silent as the trees themselves. Nothing happened. He began to grow tired. Rather, he began to grow so hungry that he became impatient. "If there is anybody in there, he must be asleep," muttered Blackie to himself. "I'll see if I can wake him up. Caw, 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 caw." Blackie waited a few minutes, then repeated his cry. He did this 3 times, and he had just made up his mind that there was nobody inside that little house when a head appeared in the doorway. Blackie was so surprised that he nearly fell from his perch. "As I live," he muttered, "that is Bowser the Hound. It certainly is. Now what is he doing way over here? I've never known him to go so far from home before." Chapter 7. Blackie the Crow Takes Pity on Bowser. Beneath a coat of ebon hue may beat a heart that's kind and true. The worst of scamps in time of need will often do a kindly deed. Bowser the Hound. "Caw, caw!" exclaimed Blackie the Crow. Bowser looked up to the top of the tall tree where Blackie sat, and in his great, soft eyes was such a look of friendliness that it gave Blackie a funny feeling. You know Blackie is not used to friendly looks. He is used to quite the other kind. Bowser came out of the old sugar house where he had spent the night and whined softly as he looked up at Blackie, and as he whined, he wagged his tail ever so slightly. Blackie didn't know what to make of it. He had never been more surprised in his life. He didn't know which surprised him most, finding Bowser way over here where he had no business to be, or Bowser's friendliness. As for Bowser, he had spent such a forlorn, miserable night, and he was so terribly lonesome that the very sound of Blackie's voice had given him a queer thrill. Never had he thought of Blackie the Crow as a friend. In fact, he never thought much about Blackie at all. Sometimes he chased Blackie out of Farmer Brown's cornfield early in the spring, but that is all he ever had to do with him. Now, however, lonesome and lost as he was, the sound of a familiar voice made him tingle all over with a friendly feeling. So he whined softly and wagged his tail feebly as he looked up at Blackie sitting in the top of a tall tree. Presently Bowser limped out to the middle of the little clearing and turned first this way and then that way. Then he sat down and howled dismally. In an instant, Blackie the Crow understood. Bowser was lost. "So that's the trouble," muttered Blackie to himself. "The silly dog has got himself lost. I never will be able to understand how anybody can get lost. I never in my life was lost and never expect to be. But it is easy enough to see that Bowser is lost and badly lost. My goodness, how lame he is. I wonder what's happened to him. Serves him right for hunting other people, but I'm sorry for him just the same. What a helpless creature a lost dog is anyway. I suppose if he doesn't find a house pretty soon, he will starve to death. Old Man Coyote wouldn't, Reddy Fox wouldn't. They would catch something to eat, no matter where they were. I suppose they wouldn't thank me for doing it, but just the same, I think I'll take pity on Bowser and help him out of his trouble. Chapter 8. How Blackie the Crow Helped Bowser. The blackest coat may cover the kindest heart. Bowser the Hound. When Blackie the Crow said to himself that he guessed he would take pity on Bowser and help him out of his trouble, he knew that he could do it without very much trouble to himself. Perhaps if there had been very much trouble in it, Blackie would not have been quite so ready and willing. Then again, perhaps it isn't fair to Blackie to think he might not have been willing. Even the most selfish people are sometimes kindly and unselfish. Blackie knew just where the nearest house was. You can always trust Blackie to know not only where every house is within sight of the places he frequents, but all about the people who live in each house. Blackie makes it his business to know these things. He could, if he would, tell you which houses have terrible guns in them and which have not. It is by knowing these things that Blackie manages to avoid danger. "If that dog knows enough to follow me, I'll take him where he can at least get something to eat," muttered Blackie. "It won't be far out of my way anyway, because if he has any sense at all, I won't have to go all the way over there." So Blackie spread his black wings and disappeared over the treetops in the direction of the nearest farmhouse. Bowser watched him disappear and whined sadly, for somehow it made him feel more lonesome than before. But for one thing, he would have gone back to his bed of hay in the corner of that sugar camp. The one thing was hunger. It seemed to Bowser that his stomach was so empty that the very sides of it had fallen in. He just must get something to eat. So, after a moment or two, Bowser turned and limped away through the trees, and he limped in the direction which Blackie the Crow had taken. You see, he could still hear Blackie's voice calling, "Caw, caw, caw," and somehow it made him feel better, less lonesome, to be within hearing of a voice he knew. Bowser had to go on 3 legs, for one leg had been so hurt in the fall over the bank that he could not put his foot to the ground. Then, too, he was very, very stiff from the cold and the wetting he had received the night before. So poor Bowser made slow work of it, and Blackie the Crow almost lost patience waiting for him to appear. As soon as Bowser came in sight, Blackie gave what was intended for a cheery caw, and then headed straight for the place he had started for that morning, giving no more thought to Bowser the Hound. You see, he knew that Bowser would shortly come to a road. If he doesn't know enough to follow that road, he deserves to starve, thought Blackie. Bowser did know enough to follow that road. The instant he saw that road, he knew that if he kept on following it, it would lead him somewhere. So with new hope in his heart, Bowser limped along. Chapter 9. Old Man Coyote Gives Out Dark Hints. A little hint dropped there or here is like a seed in spring of year. It sprouts and grows, and none may say how big 'twill be some future day. Bowser the Hound. After leading Bowser the Hound far, far away and getting him lost in strange country, Old Man Coyote trotted back to the old pasture, the green forest, and the green meadows near Farmer Brown's. He didn't have any trouble at all in finding his way back. You see, all the time he was leading Bowser away, he himself was using his eyes and taking note of where he was going. You can't lose Old Man Coyote. No, sir, you can't lose Old Man Coyote, and it is of no use to try. So stopping 2 or 3 times to hunt a little by the way, Old Man Coyote trotted back. He managed to pick up a good meal on the way, and when at last he reached his home in the old pasture, he was feeling very well satisfied with the great world in general and himself in particular. He grinned as only Old Man Coyote can grin. "I don't think any of us will be bothered by that meddlesome Bowser very soon again," said he, as he crept into his house for a nap. "If he had drowned in that river, I shouldn't have cried over it. But even as it is, I don't think he will get back here in a hurry. I must pass the word along." So a day or so later, when Sammy Jay happened along, Old Man Coyote asked him, in quite a matter-of-fact way, if he had seen anything of Bowser the Hound for a day or two. "Why do you ask?" said Sammy sharply. Old Man Coyote grinned slyly. "For no reason at all, Sammy. For no reason at all," he replied. "It just popped into my head that I hadn't heard Bowser's voice for 2 or 3 days. It set me to wondering if he is sick or if anything has happened to him." That was enough to start Sammy Jay straight for Farmer Brown's dooryard. Of course, Bowser wasn't to be seen. Sammy hung around and watched. Twice he saw Farmer Brown's boy come to the door with a worried look on his face and heard him whistle and call for Bowser. Then there wasn't the slightest doubt in Sammy's mind that something had happened to Bowser. "Old Man Coyote knows something about it, too," muttered Sammy, as he turned his head on one side and scratched his pointed cap thoughtfully. "He can't fool me. That old rascal knows where Bowser is, or what has happened to him, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he had something to do with it. I almost know he did from the way he grinned." The day was not half over before all through the Green Forest and over the Green Meadows had spread the report that Bowser the Hound was no more. Chapter 10. How Reddy Fox Investigated. Investigate if you would know that something is or isn't so. Bowser the Hound. To investigate something means to try to find out about it. Reddy Fox had heard from so many different ones about the disappearance of Bowser that he finally made up his mind that he would go investigate and find out for himself if it were true that Bowser was no longer at home in Farmer Brown's dooryard. If it were true, well, Reddy had certain plans of his own in regards to Farmer Brown's henhouse. Reddy had begun by doubting that story because it seemed to have come first from Old Man Coyote. Reddy would doubt anything about which Old Man Coyote was concerned. But Reddy had finally come to believe that something certainly had happened because half a dozen times during the day he had heard Farmer Brown's boy whistle and call and call. Just as soon as the black shadows were creeping up from the purple hills, Reddy started up towards Farmer Brown's. He didn't go directly there because he never goes directly anywhere if there is the least chance in the world that anyone may be watching him. But as he slipped along in the blackest of the black shadows, he was all the time working nearer and nearer to Farmer Brown's dooryard. Although he was inclined to think it was true that Bowser was not there, he was far too wise to take any unnecessary risk. He approached Farmer Brown's dooryard just as carefully as if he knew Bowser to be in his little house as usual. He kept in the black shadows. He crouched so low that he seemed hardly more than a black shadow himself. Every 2 or 3 steps he stopped to look, listen, and test the air with his keen nose. As he drew near Bowser's own little house, Reddy circled out around it until he could see the doorway. Then he sat down where he could peek around from behind a tree and watch. He had been there only a few moments when the back door of Farmer Brown's house opened and Farmer Brown's boy stepped out. Reddy didn't run. He knew that Farmer Brown's boy would never dream that he would dare come so near. Besides, it was very clear that Farmer Brown's boy was thinking of no one but Bowser. He whistled and called just as he had done several times during the day, but no Bowser came, so after a while, Farmer Brown's boy went back into the house. There was a worried look on his face. As soon as he heard the door close, Reddy trotted right out in the open and sat down only a few feet from the black doorway of Bowser's little house. Reddy barked softly, then he barked a little louder. He knew that if Bowser were at home, that bark would bring him out if nothing else did. Bowser didn't appear. Reddy grinned. He was sure now that Bowser was nowhere about. Chuckling to himself, he turned and trotted towards Farmer Brown's henhouse.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fighting Moose Podcast. Please join us next time as we read another exciting story. Today's music was provided by the artist Grapes, and the audio clips were provided by NASA. For more information, to contact us, or to download podcast extras, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com. Also, if you haven't done so, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for your patronage, and as always, try and do a random act of kindness every day.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world